the quick shifter from ANNITORI, which these people are amazing. And this is the quick shifter. You can tell that I have now I replaced the rod with their sensor, so I have the cables kind of going up, and I have the module in here, and they are killing the ignition by kind of killing the spark and momentarily, just so you can get your transmission unloaded and you can get those shifts in without clutch and downshift as well, which is incredible. I just can keep talking enough good things about ANNITORI and the fact that I'm able to work with them. They are amazing.
Right, so first thing I'm going to do is to disconnect the negative. Then you're going to lift the tank by undoing this bolt right here, using a piece of wood so I can prompt the actual tank and leave it like that so I can clearly see everything underneath it. I also wanted to bring you here so I can explain how you are going to be installing the system in a two coil ignition bike, right? So in this particular case, you have the harness coming from the rear of the module, which, these harness connections is the first thing you ought to do whenever you are connecting on the bike. So you have to find the cable that's a common cable that's going to be the same color between both of the two ignitions. In my case, there's a black and red cable on each of the ignitions, and the other cable is going to be either gray and then orange on the other one. So the cable you're going to be using is the common one. So the one that's a different color, for example, on one of these is going to be gray and the other one is going to be orange, you're going to leave it in the bike, and you're going to be using the common wire, which in this case is the same color for both of the ignition. In this particular FZ1, it's a red cable with a black stripe. So I remove the red cable with the white stripe from this ignition module. So you're going to be using a lead like this one that has a female and a male and a female. So you're going to be connecting the first ignition to the blue with the female, in this particular case with this black cable, and the female with the male you're going to be connecting in the first ignition cable that you removed, and then you're going to be bridging two females. So this cable is two female cable. You're going to be attaching to the common wire that you removed from the other ignition and kind of bridging again back to the common wire that you removed from the first ignition. So to repeat, I removed the common one, I installed a female male on this one. I created a bridge between the two using a two female cable between the two ignitions, connecting to where you remove the first common wire and where you remove the common wire from the other ignition module. And then that's going to have a female that's going to go to blue on the harness that goes back to the module. Then the lead that you first removed that has the common cable, which is this one, this is the cable that used to be connected here. I'm going to be using this yellow, and I'm going to connect male to female to the yellow on the harness. And then you're probably asking, Richard, so why am I going to do with this cable? Nothing. You're just going to leave it like so, because you created a bridge between the two ignition modules, so you don't have to do anything with this. So this cable here is actually acting like that common wire that used to be powering, the two ignition modules. So at this point, you are good to go. It's recommended that you're going to be kind of wrapping in paper, or not in paper, but in electrical tape, all of these connections so you can kind of keep them isolated. As of right now, I'm going to leave them like so because I want to test the bike. I want to do my static test. And then when I'm done with my static test that I know everything is working, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with protecting the connection so that it's clean and, out of the elements and whatnot.
Here, I'm going to start making some marks so I can have some reference whenever I remove the shifter or any shifter component, for example, this bolt as well as the shifter rod. Using some wrenches, use the flat part of the shifter rod so you can undo the rod from the ends. You don't have to, but you can also remove the shifter rod by undoing the bolt from the end so that it can have some leverage and you can remove it easily from the bike. Repeat the same process on the other side of the shifter rod. Since the rod are reverse thread on one of the sides, you can turn one side and it's actually going to be undoing from both, so which is great for uninstalling as well as uninstalling, or installing, I guess. Here are the parts you're going to be needing in order to build the new one. The sensor, you need the rod as well as those threaded rods. The trick here is that you measure that rod before, so you know exactly what you have to match to. So I'm going to be building the new rod, which compensate for the size of the sensor. So when you get those two together, you should be getting very, very close to the original shifter rod. And remember, you have some threaded rods as well as some of the nuts that you can use in order to kind of keep it in place as well as to match the same length that you had on the shifter rod before. I like to assemble it as a piece outside of the bike, but sometimes you just have to undo everything and kind of redo it again in front of the bike so you can kind of get the right positioning and the right position and direction so you can get the shifter rod in place. All right, at this point I feel pretty comfortable with the assembly, so I'm going to go ahead and just thread the shifter rod just a tiny bit. I'm going to use that strategy that I mentioned about being reverse thread in order to take it as an advantage for me to get it started on the right side. And since I took the part that you have to thread on the left side out, that's gonna make it super easy for me just to thread in place and kind of put in position with the bolt against the shifter mechanism, and we should be good to go. This can feel a little bit daunting, but don't worry. Just take it step by step and ensure that you have a good angle on the shifter, as well as ensuring that you have your shifter rod that is super, super, super tight so that it's not going to be bouncing or vibrating and preventing the shifter to actually work properly.
All right, so at this point, everything is connected. One way you can tell that the actual module was recognized and is recognizing all the sensors and the connections is by looking at the green light behind the actual module, this module. So last thing I did was to connect the battery to the actual module, because I connected the sensors first, the sensor as well as the harness that goes to the front of the bike first, so it's being recognized as soon as you add power. I did connect the battery directly to the module, meaning I'm pulling power every time. So that's not what I want. I want to do it so that I'm pulling power from the tail light. So I'm going to be doing that later, but before, I'm going to test it as is before I make my final position and connection and everything else. So I'm going to go ahead, put some electrical tape on my connections in the front to ensure that when I'm lowering my tank, it's not going to short circuit or getting in contact with any live power and any metal on the bike. So I don't want that. So I'm going to put some electrical tape just to prevent any issues before I do the final connection. All right, so I'm going to be installing the box right now, or the module. As you can tell, battery is not connected. So I'm going to route the cables through here. And for the test, I'm going to connect it here and ensure that your routing is correct, so you don't have to change after. The reason why it's important just to not connect the battery is because you want the module to, whenever it gets powered for the first time, is going to be recognizing and have all the peripherals connected, meaning the sensor and then the harness going to the engine ignition in this case. So I want to make sure that that's that's there, so that you don't have any issues with the box not recognizing the module. So now I'm going to connect this. I'm going to leave everything kind of unplugged but plugged, if that makes sense. And I'm going to connect this, which is coming from the harness, and the one that I just connected is the one coming from the sensor. So still not connected to power, but I can connect it to power right now. So I just want to take a quick look to the harness in the front, so I know that it's in good order and I'm not going to be, harming or damaging the box. See if I have a green LED. That means everything is connected correctly, or at the very least is recognizing the modules or the peripherals that are connected to the module. So now I am ready to put this temporarily here so that I can test the sensor on the quick shifter. All right, so I'm going to be doing the static test. What that means that I'm going to be using the bike. Here, I'm going to lift the side stand because I need to put the bike in gear. I'm not gonna go anywhere. I'm just gonna jump on the bike, put it in gear, and go through sixth gear. When I get to sixth gear, what I want to do is just make like I'm going to go to seventh if I had a seventh gear, and the sensor is going to be telling the module, "Hey, kill the power," and I should be able to hear a like a blip that's kind of caught in power. If that happens, then that means that it's ready and I can go out and take it for a spin. All right, let's do the test. This is exciting. All right, so that was a quick test, but if you can tell, there was some like happening that told me exactly what I was looking for. Is the fact that this is connected, this is getting the signal, and the sensor is telling the ignition, kill it. So now I'm going to ensure everything is in place, put the bolt on my tank, and take the bike for a spin.
All right, I don't want to get accused of not doing what I said is the recommended way. So I actually pull power from the taillight by identifying which cable from the taillight was the one who had power whenever the ignition was on. So now that I identify my cable, I'm going to be removing both black and positive from the battery because I'm going to be making the connection, but I also want to connect the sensor to the module. So I do not want any of the cables being connected to the module before the battery is connected. So I'm going to be making those connections. I'll connect the battery later after I'm done connecting the cable that is going to be providing the power for the unit. So I cut the cable and I'm going to be stripping just a tiny bit, and you can use whatever it works for you. In the past, I've soldered the cables together by kind of intervening or tapping that additional cable or tie-light cable. In this particular case, I'm going to be just using this clamp that actually allows for kind of taking the power from the wire and also sharing it by having both kind of metal connectors within the same connector. So pretty easy way to do it. There's another multiple ways to do it, but this is the one that I chose for this bike. So I'm going to be putting some electrical tape, and just to ensure that the connection is pretty firm and it's not gonna move. So now that I'm confident and I'm happy with the final installation, I'm going to be putting the tape, and I'm going to take the bike for a quick spin.